On Triple M, you're listening to Rural Focus, your voice of agriculture across regional WA. My name's Holly, and for the first time, CommBank and Harvard Uni, they've teamed up to conduct something they're calling the Farms in Focus survey, sort of giving us an insight into the trends happening on farm, which is super appropriate for Rural Focus to see how things are going. To tell me all about it is Carmel Onions. She's CommBank's Executive Manager of Agribusiness. Good morning, Carmel. How are you going?
Good morning, Holly. I'm well, thank you.
That's great. So for listeners who maybe have not come across the Farms in Focus survey yet, seeing as it is quite new, can you start by telling us a little bit about the research and what stood out maybe most to you from this year's findings?
Yeah, fabulous. So we did partner with Harvard University, and so CommBank's done this Farms in Focus survey with National Farmers Federation and the Australian Farm Institute as well. And the survey is about hearing from farmers. We absolutely just want to capture their voices and have this research as evidence that informs decision making. It's about elevating the voices of farmers to capture what they're experiencing on the ground, how they're responding, and where support is needed. So CBA supported the research to really just understand what's going on with regional customers and really how we can back them with practical support. I guess what really stood out from the research when we got it back was the tone of what we're calling cautious optimism. We know farmers are realistic about the pressures they're facing, but quite frankly, it's a little tough out there. But we also know farmers are incredibly pragmatic. They just get on with it. They're focused on, doing what they need to do in their businesses. So the survey is not a sad story of despair. It's a story about an industry facing their challenges and just getting on with it and actively adapting.
Cautious optimism. I'm going to steal that. That is the perfect way to describe what the vibe is at the moment. And this does feel like a bit of a vibe check, this survey. And of course, we do need to talk about some of these very significant pressures that the industry is going through. So maybe we just touch on the challenges for a second. What are farmers telling you are the biggest challenges that they're dealing with right now, and how it's affecting their businesses?
Yeah, that's right. There are plenty. And interestingly, this survey was run and the information collected before the Middle East crisis broke out. But undoubtedly, the thing on top of everyone's mind is input costs. Rising input costs were the number one thing facing farmers, and extreme weather, variable weather conditions. These are the two big ones that farmers called out as their main concerns today. But interestingly, if they're looking 5 years out, these are the top two that are still on their mind. And today, the instability of global markets is a really important concern, and how that's playing through commodity prices and also the cost of finance as well. But looking out further, farmers are telling us that policy and regulation is an important priority on their mind.
Yeah, 100%. Are there any other concerns that you want to mention that were in the findings?
Yeah, so, they called out those concerns which you've run through, but they kind of wrapped that up around a question asked about their profitability expectations. And, this was really quite stark information, but I think it really paints an important picture, as I said, that really needs to be elevated as part of the Farms in Focus survey. So we asked farmers, what was their outlook for profits this year compared to last, and then also over the next 5 years. And so, half of farmers today and looking forward 5 years said that they don't see any increase or improvement in their profits. So, that's tough. But I think what was also tough was that 28% of farmers today think that their profits are going to be lower than last year, and 25% think that they'll be lower in 5 years' time than today. So it really does just reinforce that these concerns farmers have raised are challenging, and, the industry really needs to get behind farmers and continue to support them off the back of this data.
Yes, yeah, 100%. So that's the cautious part of cautious optimism for sure. But Carmel, let's dive into the positives, the optimism side of things. We often hear about the tough conditions facing ag, but Let's talk about some of the reasons for optimism in these findings.
Yeah, this was probably the other really interesting thematic that came out of the survey is just how much farmers are leaning into new practices. So they're absolutely adapting their businesses and really looking for new opportunities that are productivity-led and profitability-led. And farmers are continuously evolving always. Data really stood out. About half of farmers are adopting new practices. They're either underway or you're actually doing it to improve productivity and manage costs with the sorts of practices that they're trialling.
So you mentioned there are new ways of farming. So can you give some examples of these sort of new innovative practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So in livestock, rotational grazing, 47% of farmers planning to adopt it, but another equivalent number already in the process of implementing some form of it. And so that's about resting pastures and moving mobs around to give pasture that time to recover. The other one that really stood out is about a third of farmers are really looking at low emissions livestock management because of the productivity benefits that come. And so that's things like really increasing fertility and focusing on weaning rate and considering pasture because pasture quality really drives that productivity. On the cropping side, what really stood out is just over half of farmers, 53%, are really planning to double down on crop rotations. And, we had 40% of farmers saying that they're really looking at variable rate spraying and fertiliser use. Obviously, cost savings there if those technologies can be implemented. And another one I found really interesting was 38% of cropping producers really looking at integrating livestock. And again, I guess that fits in with a rotation and a resting program and potentially being able to sort of monetize those programs of rest when you've got some livestock chumping down the pasture and earning you some money that way. So they were some of the ones that really stood out.
So following up on productivity practices, was there anything else in the survey that was interesting with this?
Yeah, the survey really went and had okay, well, what are the sort of barriers to innovation? So, it was great to hear that farmers are sort of really leading into these productivity-led approaches, but the survey really uncovered, what are the enablers to support what farmers are doing here? And the things that really stood out is really just complexity of some of these new practices and how to incorporate them into planning. So getting reliable information on the yield benefits, the profitability returns from investing in changing up your system around some of these things, and really also just the technical support, so the extension. About 40% of farmers said they really need more of that sort of data. About 25% said they're really interested in just more extension. And interesting for banks, access to finance. So some of these system changes really just need capital. So a quarter of farmers called out that, more financial incentives and access to finance were, key for this.
Really interesting stuff coming out of this survey. Any other key messages you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think the key message from the Farms in Focus survey is that we're listening and we're with you. Farming is absolutely not for the faint-hearted, and CommBank's been supporting Australian farmers for over 100 years. But the Farms in Focus survey is really about elevating the voice of farmers to understand what they're dealing with, what they're thinking, what they're planning, how they're responding. Our agribusiness teams are talking with our customers every day to make sure that they've got the information that they need, that they can access the working capital and other funding they need to help get them through. But we've shared this research right across the industry because it's just so valuable, and evidence like this really needs to inform thinking.
Fantastic. So you've shared it all across the industry, but also you're sharing it with the public. Where can we go to learn more or sort of read the full report for ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Just log on to the CommBank website, commbank.com.au, and in the search bar, just search Farms in Focus, and the report will come up for you to download.
Carmel Onions from CommBank, thanks for your time this morning.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. That's Carmel from CommBank talking about the Farms in Focus survey, which you can find online on the CommBank website. The Farms in Focus survey developed by Harvard University in collaboration with CommBank and supported by the National Farmers Federation and the Australian Farm Institute. You're listening to Rural Focus on Triple